glucose, monosaccharide sugar. You're sweeter than a woman.
We do talk about poop a lot. Now, what happens afterwards, some of you might have driven by the zoo and seen behind the zoo there's this big pile of what looks like dirt and maybe some old hay. It's not old hay or dirt. Well, some of it is old hay, but that is our compost pile. So that's what happens to a chunk of it. However, not all of it can go there. Only the stuff that comes from our herbivores go to there. Anything that comes from a carnivore actually has too many possible contaminants, which we might talk a little bit more in the talk. So that actually just goes straight to the trash. We cannot use that for health reasons. We can't use that to as compost. But that's what that is in the back. But most of my experience with the poop is from the keeper and the animal care perspective. If you go into a break room at any zoo in this nation, they will be eating their spaghetti and eating their sausages or whatever while talking about poop during their lunch breaks. That's what we do in the zoos. And the reason is, it is really the window to health. Animals in the wild have different your dog, which it's actually more beneficial for your dogs to let you know that they're ill because we take them to the vet. In the wild, if you act like you're ill, you're taken to the predator. So there's two different problems there. So animals at zoos are not like domestic animals. Domestic animals, the pressure is show that you're ill and you will get care. If you're an animal in the wild, like the zoo animals, which are still closely related, still in the same gene pool with their wild counterparts, they have to hide it. So we have to find other ways to find out if they're healthy. We have to constantly monitor every aspect. We look for behavior, yes, but usually by the time the animal starts showing it, whatever ailment has progressed much, much further. So honestly, oftentimes, we're looking at the poop. Zookeepers, all the zookeepers that you will meet generally have some type of degree, at least an associate's, usually a bachelor's degree as well. And the reason we want them, the people that are actually picking up the poop in the yard, to be the ones giving the care is because they are serious about it. They've got the training, they've got the knowledge, and they see, as soon as they start seeing us start what we call a loose stool, which is exactly what you think, then they start, we'll make a note of that. We'll say, hey, it looks like this. Now it goes a little bit further than that. I've looked through many keeper reports in my time. I've written many that I even questioned because we use we try to convey to other people what we see. So we have descriptors, things like toothpaste or tapioca, various descriptors. But we have to start coming up with more solid, similar descriptors that everyone can use, because these are actual, basically medical records. This brings me to what's known as a Bristol stool chart. This is what people use for humans. This is actually a chart. It's a numbered system to describe what your poop looks like. This is a medical system for humans. The problem is we have hundreds and thousands of species that we're caring for in zoos. So we don't have the expertise, or just the data sets, if you will, to make a chart like this all the time. But we do when we can. The animal I'm going to show you, this is the maned wolf. We're going to be talking about briefly. The maned wolf is an interesting creature. It is a canid, which means it's related to wolves and dogs. It's technically not a wolf, though. It's in its own group. It's from South America. And for a long time, people were feeding it wrong, even in zoos. But this is why we share knowledge. We start figuring things out. It turns out most wolves are closer to like an 80% meat diet, 20% herbaceous diet. They are technically omnivores, dogs and wolves. But this animal is actually closer to a 50-50 omnivore. So half of its diet's plants and vegetation, half of its diet is actually rodents and birds. So that caused problems, and so it became very important to start monitoring their stool. So even at our zoo, we actually took this chart from the Smithsonian National Zoological Park. So literally, we have a scoring chart that we put into the records to see how they're feeling that day. And if we start seeing changes, we might make notes about all the different things that could be. Now, on top of the daily monitoring of the poop is also at most facilities they at least do annually. At our facility we do biannually inspections of the feces, and that means we actually have to go out and collect every single animal's poop in the entire facility. And then we have this wonderful, she's one of our lead keepers. She's also our vet assistant, and she looks at every single one under a microscope. And I'll describe that process in a little bit to make sure that nobody has anything that we haven't seen yet that's shown up. If anybody, like for example, though, if anything showed up with a score of 0, we're automatically giving that to Angela to take a look at right away. We're not waiting for the biannual process, but we'll be looking at all of those to see if there's anything in there. There's a lot of things that can cause this, but I'll talk more about that as we go along. Now first, when we collect it, we actually use this. This is what's called a flotation system. And we first use a very sophisticated piece of equipment known as a Ziploc bag to collect it. She gets it, and she actually has to put it in here. I've actually done this process a number of times. I can set it up just fine. I don't look under it though. I'm not a parasitologist. I'm not. Half the stuff I look at, which I will show you pictures of what they would see, they actually get a little small sample. Now the trick is you have to get it from the middle. You can't get it from the outside because the outside is actually contaminated. So you need it from the center. You put it in there, and then the flotation system goes in there. Then you lock it in. It actually turns and locks in there. Then up to this line you fill with a solution. The solution you use is always going to be the same one, and it has instructions, and each type of solution has a certain set time. So you pour that in there, you let it set for a while, and you also you fill it just so with water as well, and you put a slide on top. This is called a flotation system because basically the poo's on the bottom, and up here is the slide that you're going to be looking at. So what that solution does is it actually breaks everything up, and then all the little organisms start floating to the surface. So that's what we want to look at. So we want to see, this is looking for multicellular organisms, or actually not multicellular, but unicellular, larger type eukaryotes. We're not necessarily looking at all of the bacteria when we're doing a slide like this. We're looking at larger things. Or not eukaryotes, prokaryotes. And then you take that and put it onto a slide. And then what you'd be looking at actually would be something like this. First time I did this, I helped out somebody and they let me look under the microscope, and I was like, oh God, that looks horrible. I could not find any examples of what I saw that looked horrific and barbed and fangy teethed and everything, and I was like, that's gotta be bad. They're like, no, that's normal. No, that's normal. The bad things actually, to me, are always the most benign in these. They just look like little circles. Because this one is Giardia. Over here we have Cryptosporidia. We have worms, and usually you don't see worms in the actual slide. What you find are the eggs, and when you start seeing the eggs, you know that that animal's infected. But probably the one that we see the most is this guy. This is Coccidia, which is a very common gastrointestinal parasite. So these are the types of things that we're looking for in our animals, and then once we see them, we start treating them for it. Even if it's a small amount, just to make sure, because if our view is, if it's enough that we can spot it on a slide, then that's enough that we need to start working on just to make sure it doesn't go out of control. Now, a lot of things though, let's go back a little bit, a lot of things can affect that Bristol chart here. It's not necessarily, just because you're getting loose stools does not mean that it is because of your diet. It does not necessarily mean that it is because of you're infected with something. This comes to one of the things that now that I'm an educator working with program animals, this is the type of studies that I'm now looking at. I'm not going to read the whole title of this paper, but I saw the presentation. This is basically the establishment of application of fecal glucocorticoid metabolite, and basically what that is a hormone that's directly related to stress that sticks around in the poop. And the reason we study this in zoos is because this stress hormone is a long-term stress hormone. Yes, sometimes we take an animal out of the program, it gets a little freaked out. We know it's going to be stressed. But how is that actually affecting it in the long run? That's what we want to know. This is a long-term stress hormone, which means this is one that's associated with, you might associate, I guess, with PTSD. If you're starting to see this hormone start show up a lot, then you know that animal is under a stressor for a long period of time. So we actually can, or at least, I shouldn't say if it's there, but if it spikes up too much is more the reality. Because this hormone will always be in there. But this means that all these things actually change your entire GI tract. So if you are stressed, if an animal is stressed, sometimes right after a medical procedure, even if we didn't do anything to the animal, they'll have loose stools for like the next few days. And the reason is their whole pH balance in their body has shifted. Everything is moved and it has changed because there's now stress hormones in there. There's a few other things. But we can look at this to find out, for example, are we using, not that we're doing this study here at our zoo, but it's helping us learn how often we can use, say, program animals out on programs without giving them too much stress. Is taking them out of their exhibit giving them stress? Or, and they do a number of experiments, but this is the way we can measure it. Because the animal will always try to act normal as much as possible. So we combine this knowledge with behavioral observations, and we use all of this data and put it together for the animal's health. So really in the zoo, I have said it before, the poo is the window to the health. The eyes are the window to the soul, but the poo is the window to the health of the animal in the end. Does anybody have any questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So you have a chart of the main
Of the
wolf?
maned wolf, yes.
Is there a database where you can upload like feces of different species of animals?
Different species of animals for that? No, what we generally do, we do have group forums. And basically what happens is like the experts with an animal tend to create those. There's not one database that I know of. Every so often there's a few studies going on with an individual species. But the problem is there's so many species out there. We don't even everyone wants to know how long something lives. We're dealing with so many species in the zoological field. We don't even have an actual accurate data point just to find out the median life expectancy of an animal, let alone the exact poo chart of every species. But we do share that knowledge, and now with technology using forums, and since we are members of the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, they have actual group forums where we talk about this and share all this knowledge. I just shared this paper with another individual from another zoo who had the same questions that everybody else had, and then I even connected them with the author of the paper because they were all on the same network. So we're all, with the technology, we're basically all interlinking our knowledge, and every so often you'll get somebody who is like, hey, can somebody share me various pictures of the poo? And that's literally how I think that maned wolf one got created.
Perfect.
Somebody said, hey, send me all of them, all the spectrums. And then also usually put in there with a little bit of explanation like, well, this one's old, this one had stressors, this one maybe has been having a case of Giardia or something along those lines, or an E. coli breakout or something along those lines. Usually it's coccidia or something more common. But yeah, so we share, but we don't have an exact database for it.
So that would be